Like in Colombia, we make telenovelas, and they're very good. Like the original Ugly Betty is a Colombian telenovela before it was adapted, I think, literally by every country in the world. Because there is no story more universal than "What if woman ugly?" It's like, what if a bunch of men decide that a woman is ugly? Truly universal.
Yeah.
And the twist in, I think, all of them is like she gets a makeover. So truly progressive.
First I got your voicemail, then I got you. We can meet in person or maybe on Zoom. So tell me what's your genre, tell me what do you do. I'd like to know the things that specifically make you.
Hey, I'm Tim Barnes. You are the genre. And in every episode of this show, I ask a great new guest about the first genre that inspired them, the first craft that they pursued, and how they feel about that first pursuit now. In this episode, I'm talking to comedian and writer Felipe Torres Medina. He writes for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert and has a new book out called America, Let Me In, a choose your own immigration story. Remember those choose your own adventure books? There was one that I loved in middle school that was about Luke Skywalker. You could choose how he navigated the situations in Star Wars: A New Hope. This one is similar, but it's not about the fantasy universe of Star Wars. It's about the serious topic of immigration. And as an immigrant himself, Felipe knows how to find the humor in it. Months ago, as soon as I saw Felipe post about it, I reached out to him. I was like, I would love to get an advanced copy of this so I can interview you. And then, naturally, it took me so long to finally set up our interview. But I'm glad you can listen to it now. Because after this episode, I'll be taking a break. The podcast will likely return mid-May. And, you know, it's a much-needed break. This has been an exhausting year so far. And it'll be healthy for me to step back for a bit, record a new batch of episodes, and find a nice, natural groove again. You know, sometimes you got to do spring cleaning of the mind. I also have to prepare for a virtual event that I'll be hosting for the Queens Public Library, in which I'll be interviewing Lev Grossman, who writes the Magician's books. That'll be happening May 14th. And, you know, if you enjoy this podcast, there are a few ways that you can support it. You can leave a nice rating or review to the podcast wherever you're listening to it. You can also subscribe to the newsletter associated with it. There's a link to that in your show notes and at youarethegenre.com. You can subscribe for free for regular updates on publicly available episodes. But you can also upgrade to paid for advanced episodes and other goodies. You Are the Genre is basically an expansion of a newsletter that I have called Letters from African America. It's named after one of my oldest jokes. And one of the things that I do there is I email 5 jokes a day by 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you want more of Tim Barnes during this break in the podcast, this is a great way to do it. However, ultimately, this show isn't about me. It's about you. My hope is that by asking the core questions of this podcast to my guests, it helps you find what you ultimately want to be doing. Give you some framework. Speaking of framework, I want to give a quick shout out to Freddie Nunez, who created and sings the You Are the Genre theme song, and Adam Smith, who produced it. And an even bigger shout out to Felipe Torres Medina. He's written for Reductress, College Humor, The New Yorker, McSweeney's. He writes for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. And as I mentioned, he has a new book out called America, Let Me In. That is absolutely fantastic. You can find out more about all those things at FelipeTorresMedina.com. And here's my conversation with him. Enjoy. Well, thanks for joining me on the show. I know this has been a long time coming, and I apologize. I try to get ahead of myself, and then life happens, and life is really happening these days. You know?
Oh, isn't it happening? Isn't it happening? It just won't stop happening.
Yeah, exactly. How long have you been writing for Colbert, by the way? How long have you been writing for The Late Show?
5 years and a little change.
Okay, so you were there for a bit of the first Trump term.
Yes, I was there for basically my first week was the first impeachment trial. And then COVID happened and the 2020 election.
Yeah.
And then the January 6th and then the second impeachment trial. So that was my first year and a half at the show.
So yeah, same. That's when I started writing for late night. I started right before the pandemic hit. So I was writing for Jimmy Fallon, and I was there for a year and a half. Never met him in person. Never met most of my coworkers in person. Just a totally insane time.
Yeah.
But I know how much the grind of late night is, and I don't know. I have no concept of how you were able to write a book, given how intensive the writing schedule is on shows like that.
Yeah, it was a lot of like any downtime I had like after work. It was always like a lot of like, okay, we're done. I have to get a few pages in. Even if it's just 20 minutes today, I have
Yeah.
to do it. Uh so it was a lot of discipline and telling myself I don't get to be a person until I've done this, which sucked. Uh,
Yeah.
and then uh like obviously it sucked, but it kind of helped that the writer's strike happened. So the days I wasn't picketing, I was writing the book. Obviously, I'm glad the strike is over and we won and all that, but also it was convenient, at least for me, to use my creative energy, and I was able to use it channel into this. So that helped me like make some progress on the book.
You effectively use the writer strike, which is great.
Yeah, I mean the days I wasn't spiraling or picketing, I wrote.
Got it, got it. What was like the direct lead up to something like this? Was it things that you're performing outside of the Late Show that kind of inspired, like, you know what, I can really fill a lot of pages with this?
So I came up with this idea about 2017 about like kind of like, oh, I maybe want to write a book, a humor book about immigration. And I tried and it wasn't cooked, like I mean it was cooked was what I mean. Like it was bad.
It was, yeah,
Yeah,
overcooked.
it was overcooked. And so I was like, okay, well, this sucks. But the idea is not bad. And I kind of just let it soak. And then you and I have a mutual friend, Reed Kavner, who
Yeah.
produces a bunch of great shows here in New York City. And Reed has a show called Next Slide, Please, which you've done. And it's a PowerPoint comedy show. And I was like, oh, well, this idea of like many paths to immigration, which is something that I really wanted to do. I didn't want to do a memoir because I wanted to like kind of like it's so encyclopedic. It's so much that I was like, how can I tell all these stories? And so
Yeah.
the idea of like, oh, you could maybe like interactively choose your story or your path was really appealing to me, and it was playful, and it was like already remove that layer of like headiness around immigration. Like you
Yeah.
say immigration, everyone's like, uh-oh, you know
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like really. So being able to have like a layer of playfulness on it was like, oh great, I can just do that. And so I asked Reed, what is the limit of slides I can have on this show? And he said, as many as you want, as long as your set is not longer than 12 minutes. And I said, excellent.
Nice.
And so I wrote like just this very playful, interactive, very silly, because it was going to be a live show, like a stand-up comedy show, set like kind of like set of paths that did explain visas a little bit and took a couple paths. And I was like, you know what? I think I can do the book now. I think I can do that idea I had back in 2017. I kind of sat down and wrote a book proposal, and it came out kind of using that skeleton from that show that I'd done and then adding a lot more stuff. I got my book proposal done, and then it sold, and then I had to write the book because I had a contract.
That feels like a very specific level of courage to write a book proposal. It's something I've never done before. Like, is it different than anything else? Like, it's different than doing stand up, different than, writing a packet. It's like, hey, publisher, I think that I deserve this. That's kind of nerve wracking to me.
It's like a packet for your book, but like it's like pitching a show, I guess, is the closest thing.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
you're like, I believe this is a good story to tell.
Uh,
And you just kind of like bare your soul out there. But the book proposal is half like book, and you have to include a lot of sample pages, but the other half is like half pitch deck.
got it, got
Like it's like, who's going to read this book? Oh my God, we're going to sell 1 million copies.
it.
Wink, wink. And like, who could talk about this book? Who could promote it? Who, like, obviously, like these days, you can't avoid it. Like, do you have followers on social
Yeah, yeah,
media?
yeah.
Are they going to like buy the book? I included about 35, 40 like Word doc pages
Uh-huh.
of the book, but the proposal itself is like 60
Yeah.
because the other pages are like what's this book? Who should read it? Like, blah, blah, blah. And it's all very like ad salesy, which I guess it helped that I had worked in advertising as a copywriter before. So I kind of had
Yeah.
some experience on how to sell creative. And the proposal also had the interactive format. So like the first thing was like, if I think one of the first choices after the like second page was like, if you are not interested in this book, turn to page whatever, and it said like, thank you for reading. Can you pass it to someone who would think would be interested? And then there was one that was like, if your interest is piqued, turn to the next page, and then you did the whole thing. But then there was one that was like, if you're interested and are like, I'm sold, I'm gonna give Felipe $1,000,000, turn to this page. And it was like, thank you for the
Yeah,
$1,000,000. You know? So I kind of try to put like the voice and the playfulness of the book in the proposal, even though it's this strange document that you're only going to do as a book proposal. You know, it's
yeah.
like its own literary genre almost.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you for saying the buzzword for the show, genre. I'm excited
Yes.
to talk to you because I've often felt like no one understands America more than the people who have just basically joined America. And I always think about how there's this beautiful realization when I take a new route home.
Uh-huh.
Like
Uh-huh.
suddenly I'm seeing like a home in a totally different perspective. Like, oh, now I see how people from this side, it's a
Yeah.
crazy
That's
kind of.
really beautiful. Like what you just said. That's like very beautiful.
Well, thank you, thank you. But then I always think like when many immigrants, they can see the matrix code of the U.S. Like
Yeah.
they see it rightfully so as like a strategy game because that's kind of what it is. And the people who grew up here, you kind of like you're coaxed into. I mean, you grew up, pledging allegiance to a flag. You have all these sort of concepts, but having to marry, the things that you're ingrained with from your birthplace to where you immigrate to. That's such a fascinating mix of things. It's like a chemistry, like a chemistry test.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, you have to become you are a person of both places, and you always will be, and I think that is really beautiful. Like, it's not like, oh, you're less patriotic because you're an immigrant. In fact, I make the argument in the book that one of the biggest acts of love you can do is to move somewhere because you're choosing it, right? Like your home country is like your family. You love them, they're
yeah,
great,
yeah,
but sometimes they're not that great, and that's still fine. You still love them. But like the place you move to, the place you immigrate to, and it doesn't have to be countries, it can be you're moving cities or whatever.
yeah,
That is an act of love. And it's like choosing your romantic partner a little bit.
yeah,
And it's like, I know they have failings. Because I think that's another big thing that like sometimes in very liberal circles you find about America is people being like, oh, but this country, man. And sometimes I have to be like, no, yeah, like for sure. Yes, a lot bad. A
yeah,
lot.
yeah, yeah.
But also, what you say about like being able to see the matrix code. I mean, to me, it's a little bit like it's so true, but it's like when you see your romantic partner, you're like, well, I'm not blind, or I. It's not that I can't see or don't appreciate those attitudes that you might find jarring about it.
Yeah,
I'm okay with them, for like a long-term romantic partner. That
yeah,
said, a lot of people move here and it gives them the ick, and they're like, I'm gonna go back or go somewhere else.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And there are things about American culture that I'm always gonna be like, ick. Like I said this recently, but caring about college sports,
Oh yeah.
ick, ick. I'm like, those people are 22 years old. Why do you care that much? Like,
Yeah. There is something where it's like what you're saying about choice, because I feel like recently I've been like, wait, at what point in my life did I agree to pay taxes? You know what I mean? Like I'm just born here and this is the case, but there isn't that element of choice in that similar way.
well, you're free to pay taxes. In America, you're free to pay
Yeah, you're
taxes.
exactly. So you were born in Colombia.
Yes.
When did you come to the US?
When I was 21. So that was in 2013.
Uh, And what are the biggest differences, like culturally?
Um, well, a lot. I think the U.S. loves big, and the U.S. loves to be sure of itself,
Hmm.
and I think that's great. That's actually, I think, an asset about the United States. It's like, no, we can do this. We can probably figure it out. Uh, Colombia is a little bit more like, well, we'll see. But I think that's because of like, and it's kind of connected to this sad state of our politics these days. But it's like, you know, um, I think when you grow up in a country where like the government has most of the time failed most of the people, everyone's like, I don't know, whatever,
Yeah, right.
Whereas here in America, like the government has failed so many people historically, but they've done a really good job at propagandizing to be like, no, this works.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and so I think that that's a big thing.
It's
Where
like, at
like,
least you got your big gulp, At
yeah,
least,
exactly. You get your big gulp, and you know what? I will say, like, it's not necessarily a cultural difference, but the semi-religious experience that it was to me to come here as a tourist and we used to go to a Florida a lot,
uh,
to a Publix or
oh
like
yeah,
any sort of American grocery store, and being like, oh my god, it's really like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It was like everything is big and more and most here.
yes,
And it's not that like we didn't have like empty supermarkets in Colombia or anything, but it was just so much,
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
that's a big one. And I think it's funny, my wife is from the Midwest, and so what we've discovered is that Midwestern culture, and I think Black culture as well and Latin culture are very similar. Of course they have differences, but
Yeah.
they're a little bit more like less individualistic than your traditional, like, white Anglican Protestant kind of culture. They're very tied to their religion.
Mm,
Even what I say is I'm a lapsed Catholic, but really I'm culturally Catholic.
mm.
Like I was raised Catholic in a completely Catholic country.
Yeah,
So like I'm like, well, no, I care if the Pope is not well. Why, you're not a Catholic? Well, no, but I'm a Catholic,
yeah, yeah.
So there are a lot of differences about like individualism and stuff like that. But when you get to certain communities in the States, that we're actually very similar,
Mm,
and I do think we Americans, and I mean this of all the Americas, are quite similar.
okay. Yeah, yeah,
Latin Americans have their own like things that are similar between themselves, but like we really are the kinds of people who are like, no, we don't like kings.
yeah,
and
yeah.
and I think that that is a big identity throughout the entire hemisphere.
It could
Like
be changing rapidly, but yes.
it could, yes. Certainly, there's a lot of people here who suddenly love that. But I will say, as someone who comes from Latin America, we've tried strongmen, and I'm excited to see how this adventure unfolds for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, as many people on the right say, "Daddy's home."
Daddy's home. Daddy is home.
What were some? What would you say the first genre was that called out to you? And do you feel like the immigrant experience ties into that in some way?
I think comedy. I mean,
Uh,
obviously, it's weird to say comedy ties to the immigrant experience when we look at the news.
yeah.
Um, but like the immigrant experience is crazy silly.
Uh,
um when you're doing like everything right, it's full of contradictions, and you're a comedian, that like contradiction is where like
that's where
comedy
we
is
thrive.
born.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, I use comedy as a way to like look at the world, just because that's how my brain works. A lot of comedy is looking at something incongruous or like contradictory and being like, wait, that's weird,
Mm,
I noticed that. And just saying it out loud makes people laugh, I think, because it either they also recognized it as weird but didn't say it, or they're like, oh, you shouldn't really say that, right? And so a lot of immigration is like, well, we need you to like, when you're trying to get a visa to come to the States, you have to fill out this form called the DS 160 form. That's
uh,
just you requesting to come. This is not a granting you a visa or anything. It's like you're filling out information requesting to come, and the website crashes every 25 minutes. It's a disaster.
uh,
It'll take you 4 hours to fill out like a 10-page form.
Yeah.
because it keeps crashing. It doesn't save your progress. You can only do it online. But here's the best part. This is to get your appointment to go to the embassy, to get an interview, to get a visa. You
Yeah.
know? And this is even if you just want to come as a tourist. So there's all these layers. You
Yeah.
do this thing that you can only do online. You cannot fill it out in pen and paper. And then for your interview, once it is granted, you have to print it out and bring it out printed.
Well, you have to print it out from the final page of the website.
of the ever breaking
Of
website.
Yeah.
So you can't even submit it online. So why are you filling it out online if it always breaks? And so it is one of those like laugh or cry scenarios where for
Yeah.
me it was like I have to laugh.
Well, what was the comedy that was calling out to you? Was it like stand-up? Was it television related?
I think it was television related. I liked stand-up, but I don't think it was necessarily the first thing in comedy that called to me. I really liked satire and parody my whole life.
Uh-huh.
And so when doing immigration, I did grow up on like the late night shows, and like I think I remember watching Weekend Update for the first time as a like, the ideal SNL watcher, 13-year-old boy
Yeah.
home Saturday night. Parents are doing something else and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I think I remember it might have been a rerun of Tina and Jimmy hosting Update. And I was like, holy shit, this is incredible. And so that was really calling to me. And then as I got older, a lot of like sitcoms. I was like a huge sitcom watcher, both traditional stuff. But then as I became a teen, like I grew up on Arrested Development and The Simpsons, and later like 30 Rock and stuff like that.
All very American shows.
Because that's what we got in Colombia. Like in Colombia, we make telenovelas, and they're very good. Like the original Ugly Betty is a Colombian telenovela before it was adapted, I think literally by every country in the world, because there is no story more universal than "What if woman ugly?" It's like, what if a bunch of men decide that a woman is ugly? Truly universal.
Yeah.
And the twist in, I think all of them is like she gets a makeover. So truly progressive. That is possibly one of the biggest cultural experts that Colombia has ever done. And so my mom watched a lot of telenovelas, and those are always dramedies. Those are always a mix of high and low, like high drama and low, quote unquote, like silly comedy. But the big like things that I would watch that I would enjoy were all American TV. My parents lived in England for a while, so I did watch a little bit of like Monty Python and stuff, but it was all like American influences just showering us. We watched Prison Break and 24 in the middle of the War on Terror, and we were like, yeah, Jack Bauer, he doesn't play by the rules.
Yeah. And you said the Simpsons in particular stood out to you.
Yeah, Simpsons really stood out to me because it was a little bit like Ludovico treatment in A Clockwork Orange, exposure therapy. Because in Colombia, well, first of all, we could do a whole episode of a podcast about the dub, because it aired dubbed into Latin American Spanish, and it's an incredible work of adaptation. Like the jokes are incredible. It's the same jokes that, like, it's not the same jokes that Conan and all these like great writers were writing in those hailed perfect seasons, quote unquote, of The Simpsons, because they had to adapt them to a whole other audience, but they still work and they're just as memorable. Like people quote the jokes that these translators wrote.
I mean, what's an example of that? Like, what's an example of a difference? Like, I'm trying to think of like a specific, cultural reference in a Simpsons episode that's kind of translated different. Or you're just saying it's like different to match the mouth movements, like they had to.
There's a lot. Like there's one that I can't quote in English that I can definitely quote in Spanish. That's like when Homer like has this like almost like a rat king or like this collection of rats.
Yeah.
And Marge is like, what on earth is this? And he says like, oh, the big one has a name, and I don't know. He says a funny name.
Yeah.
Right. I called this one whatever. I can't quote it in English, but it's etched in my brain that in Spanish her name is Cuca. And I'm like, yes, the big one is called Cuca. And it's just the choice of picking the right name,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
is crazy. And like references to so many celebrities. The Simpsons had like Leonard Nimoy in it, and like sure, Star Trek was a thing, but not as big a thing, things
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. And so what I meant by exposure therapy is that in Colombia on national, and the two national TV channels that we had, if you didn't have cable,
Mm.
um, and one of the two on Saturdays, it would be the news at noon until like 1. And then from 1 to 5, nonstop, it was just reruns of The Simpsons.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And if you were a kid and you didn't have plans, all you did every Saturday and every Sunday was just sit your ass and watch The Simpsons. And that's like an incredible comedy school,
Yeah.
even if it's the translation.
It's fascinating that we don't often get an alternate version of that in the US. Like all the
Yeah.
cartoons created throughout the world, we
Yeah.
don't get like an American dub of a of a comedy cartoon,
There
from
should
from
be an
another.
American dub of every British show. So it's still English, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
the American dub. So like Thomas the Tank Engine or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Harry Potter. They should just redub all the Harry Potter movies into American English.
Yeah, yeah.
That would be really great.
Is there any connection that you can take from, like, if we are to, perceive these American exports as some sort of propaganda? What is the message of that propaganda about America? Like, what were you getting out of that? Like, America is a place where you're just like allowed to make fun of it in this particular way, I guess.
I think that was a big thing. I think the American comedic tradition is great and very cool, because it is very much like we can make fun of America, we can make fun of ourselves. My parents, I think when I was really young, they were like, "Well, you can't watch The Simpsons; they're rude," you know, and they are rude, but they like in the very like Puritan standard. But they like make fun. They're like, well, that Bart makes fun of his mother, and it's like, correct. The show makes fun of everyone. Uh, So I think that propaganda of America is a place where you can just kind of like make fun of anything
Yeah.
was a big deal. Of course, I grew up in the same time period as like when South Park came out,
Hmm.
right? And that was also very like I didn't have the cable channel that aired South Park because my family didn't have that much money then. So I never got on the South Park train, but I think it was because in Colombia there was like one big comedy show, and it's fine. It's
Hmm.
perfectly fine. It's a perfectly fine comedy show, but it hasn't changed its formula in 40 years. And it's kind of just like stand-ups and characters come out and people laugh.
Okay.
They used to do some sketches, but they don't anymore.
So just stand-ups and characters.
Yeah, it's every Saturday. It's called Happy Saturdays, Sábados Felices.
Uh,
And there's a host, and he's like, "Welcome," and now this character, and he would come out, same stage, maybe some costume,
yeah.
and tell some jokes and it was a variety show, and they had a band, but other than that, like it was all telenovelas, and some of them are comedic, and they had comedic characters, but the idea of like comedy as a genre, as an
Yeah.
art form, was very limited. And I think the propaganda of like you can just write funny in the United States was something I was like, what? And now I know that you can write funny anywhere,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
at the time as a child, I think it really
I
put it in
must
my
go to the
brain.
U.S. to do this. Yes.
Yes.
Did you have friends who had the same interest in American comedy, or were you kind of like an odd man out in a way
I
because it
think
was?
we all grew up on American comedy because it was the thing that was on TV. When I was in college, I had a group of friends who were like, "Oh, we watch Saturday Night Live," even though like it wasn't live,
Yeah.
because it arrived in Colombia. It aired in Colombia like 3 months late, and so then I had a circle of friends who was like, "Yeah, this is great. Like this is part of culture and something that we like." But for the majority of people, like you know, I I love my mother, and she's very proud that I write for the Late Show. But
Yeah.
sometimes she'll do that. She's very proud of me, but she'll be like, uh, oh, and my son, he writes for Stephen Colbert, and like 90% of people in Colombia are like, who is that? I have no idea who this man is.
I'm reminded of, I think some point last year you told me a sweet story about your mom getting to meet Stephen Colbert, by the way.
She did get to meet him at the Emmys one time, and he was very nice because he's a very nice guy. And yeah, she loves him. Who doesn't? He's such a nice guy.
Yeah, she's willing to say his name, even though 90% of the people
Truly, 90% of the people in Colombia do that thing where you're like, oh, yeah, congrats.
Yeah, cool. Poor guy. Yeah. What was the first craft that you pursued then? Was it comedy related?
No, I was very much because I went to college in Colombia for literature. I don't think I realized that I could become a comedy writer, despite the fact that I'm saying like I had all these influences. I don't think I ever I didn't think that it was a job until like halfway through college, and then I was like, wait, all these shows that my friends and I love and keep talking about, people write them. I should do that. So I was very much like, I want to be a writer,
Okay.
And I also like theater and drama, but I was like, I would like to be a writer, and I was like trying to be, I did all the things that like artistic boys or artistic people will try to do. Like I wrote like moody, like short stories and like a novel about being misunderstood. And,
Wait. How old are you at this point?
17, I think.
17.
When I first tried to write a novel, I was 17.
Did you write a full novel?
No, of course not. No, Tim, come on. I was 17.
Let's dive into the content of this novel. You're describing it broadly about a moody boy, but
it was, I really wish I could remember more. It was about a moody boy who oh God, this is so embarrassing. Who wasn't sure if he was hallucinating a girl.
We've all rented that DVD. That's like an indie.
Yes, like one exactly. Of those. It's like I watched Garden State one time, and I was like, "What if?"
And what stopped you? What stopped you from completing it?
I think that I knew that it was ass. I want to say that it was that, but maybe it was that I was 17 and I wanted to go party, and maybe like I also like play music, and I was in a band, and I was like, maybe I'll do the band instead. Maybe I'll be a rock star instead of.
I love that you said manic pixie dream girl, but maybe she's also a figment of my imagination.
Like exactly, it was really that. And the whole thing was like, you didn't know, the narrator was hallucinating stuff throughout, like other stuff, so you didn't know if it was he didn't know if the girl was hallucinated or not, because he had so many hallucinations. It was bad. It was so bad. I've now remembered, and you've made me tap into something that I had blocked off my memory for.
I'm sure it'll come back in some
16 years.
So that was the first craft, though, to be a serious, I suppose, novelist. Is that the best way to put it?
I think so, yeah, like a novelist. I was like, I'll be a capital W writer.
And who are some of the influences that led to that then? So it wasn't just comedy, but you liked... So
I'm Colombian, so I'm by law obligated to say that I love Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which I do. I love Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I really, he is one of my favorite writers. And at the time I was reading a lot of what they call the Latin American boom, who are writers from all of Latin America who wrote around the same time period, very formally interesting stuff. So I had read a lot of writers like that. In fact, there's one of them, Julio Cortázar, who was Argentine, who wrote a novel that's kind of like jumping. You jump between chapters. It is about an artistic man who falls in love with a woman in Paris. So, but that novel's called Hopscotch, and it's been very interesting to me to be like, my book is also interactive like that. It doesn't have all the romance in it, but it is like I'm following a literary tradition of South America. So like that was a big influence. I was 16 when I read Catcher in the Rye, and I was like, this is the greatest book that has ever existed. And I think I also like really liked Agatha Christie. So I was a little bit of like, I would say those were like the big inspirations as a kid. Poe, maybe because he did cool short stories. Agatha Christie for sure. And I mean, she sucks now, but I grew up on Harry Potter. Like J.K. Rowling was obviously a big influence into the idea of like, oh, I can write stories because I like to read stories.
Yeah.
And I never try to write. I guess as a child, but as an adult trying to be a writer, I never try to write fantasy because I am very much like Tolkien did it best. Everyone
Mm.
else can't do it. And I will revisit and read Tolkien as much as I can, but it is one of those like things where I'm like, no, I'll leave that to the experts.
There's something about Tolkien where I've recently had this thought where it's like, how what are the parameters of the amount of time that he invested
Oh my
into
god!
this?
I mean, that was his life. I mean,
Like truly, it feels like because I struggle with this. Like I try to write a lot, and you have to carve out time from your loved ones in order to do that.
yes,
So if
you
I
do.
was married to J.R.R. Tolkien, I would think that he just hates me because he's like, no, I got to write about the weather that day.
Well, yeah, my favorite thing is like the idea that he would have been like, "Darling, I'm starting a new project where I'm going to like come up with an alphabet," and like 3 months later, he's like, "It is now the Bible, but for this book I made up." I'm so sorry. No. Also, there are now 4 languages, and I must write the philology of all of them.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that is one of those things where I think he was just a wonderful genius who was also very traumatized by World War One.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying not to keep bringing up your current boss, but mentioning the Lord of the Rings is
Right.
interesting. And were you watching things like the Colbert Report? Was the Daily Show something that you had access to?
Yes, we did. But again, it's this weird, bizarro version of it because, like Saturday Night Live, we got the Daily Show. We did get every day, but again, 3 months late.
Yeah.
So it was really like watching the news of the past. But the report we had only once a week.
Okay, that
And
is
that
interesting.
is something that I learned later was called the International Edition. That they would kind of like do a mashup of the best of the week,
Uh,
and I've learned that it aired and it was very successful in like military bases,
okay,
especially
okay,
at the time in like Iraq and Afghanistan,
yeah,
and they couldn't get the like everyday Colbert Report, so they would make like a kind of like a best of the week, and that
okay,
episode would be the Colbert Report International Edition, and that's what aired when I was growing up in Colombia, and so that's what I watched. I would say the Daily and the Report and Weekend Update were huge for me as like those late high school years, you
yeah,
know, because it was like, oh wait, y- you can do this, and like the lampooning of the news, and it's very interesting. Actually, I might have a copy of it somewhere down here. But there was a comedian in Colombia that I was too young to grasp fully what he was doing. His name was Jaime Garzon, and my father and my everyone, but my father in particular, I remember really, really, really liked him, and he
uh,
did basically a daily show. He
oh
did
wow, yeah,
every Sunday or every Saturday he would do a fake newscast where he'd have characters and he'd make fun of the politicians and he would interview them and whatever. It was kind of a mix of the report and the Daily Show. And unfortunately, he was killed by paramilitary death squad.
oh
Uh,
wow,
um, and so I think that's another thing. Like there was this thing in my childhood, this show when I was like 6 or 7,
hmm,
and then this guy, that kind of like tradition of satire is literally gunned down in Colombia
yeah,
in the dark times. Now Colombia gets better after a couple of years, and then I start getting all these influences from the US. And I think very recently is when I realized, oh, this has been in my life my whole life. This
yeah, yeah,
satire itch. I've always liked it. Then there was the gap because we didn't have anything that we produced and we didn't get the shows. And then we got the Daily Show and the report and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, I have always loved this thing. This has always been my jam.
It's great to feel it coming full circle with the book America Let Me In, because I do feel like I can sense that influence of all the people that you're mentioning for sure. And
Oh,
it
thank
has
you.
to be an added level of surreality where not only are you working for one of your influences, but you're in but that person has like written a nice blurb about it. And
Yes,
like, do you kind of pinch yourself about that?
a
Like, are you
lot,
able
a
to?
lot.
Yeah,
I think,
that's amazing. Yeah.
yeah, I do. I pinch myself every day, I think, when I'm like, well, this is a very stupid thing, and somehow I'm making money out of saying this very stupid thing to someone I deeply respect, and he's like, yes, that stupid thing is funny.
Yeah.
Uh, so, yeah, I do. I pinch myself a lot, and I do think like obviously I don't want to be presumptuous, but like being able to say like, no, I've added a little, a tiny grain of sand into the comedic behemoth that is like American satire,
Yeah.
and like I did a little thing, that's influenced by all of it, but now hopefully because it's about something that a lot of people don't know a lot about or talk about,
Mm.
it might maybe hopefully inspire some people to be like, oh, I could talk about something serious in a funny way if I do it right. I hope I did
Yeah.
it right in this book.
I think you did, which is makes it exciting to ask this last question, which is how do you feel about that first pursuit of being a novelist now, being a serious person, being someone who, what do you think that was? What was it inside of you that it seems like, it does seem like that's an element of the same thing that comedians want. Comedians want respect, but in a different way. But I feel like people who go out of their way to be a serious novelist, they want some sort of stamp of approval from the world that's just
I
like a little different than what comedians want.
Yeah, I think I like attention. Uh, and I didn't know that you could get attention from being funny beyond like your family being like, "Oh, he does impressions sometimes, just let him."
You
You know.
gotta,
But no, I think I, I'm a very like I'm such a like sensitive boy, you know. Like sometimes I'll hear a song and I'm like, "Man, and I think as I grow older, I'm like, oh, I just like really like art in
Mm,
general, and I think
mm,
that instinct to be a novelist was like, well, this is how I would like to express myself, and figuring out that maybe like I'm not going to say I'm never going to write a novel, maybe I
yeah,
will, but people talk about writing is so much about finding your voice, but it is, and I found that comedy is my voice, and it is what like excites me when I write it, and
yeah,
so I think it was born out of that feeling of I want to say things, and there are people here saying things really well, and what I
mhm,
want is to be able to do that,
yeah,
and when I play some instruments not like very well, but like I learned music, and sometimes I'll hear a song and I'm like, oh, the way this guitar sounds is like I want to be able to do that. I'm not going to spend my life doing it, but like
yeah,
I love how this person can take this thing and create a beautiful like arrangement that and I think it's the same instinct. It's just me being like I like to, when someone is very good at art. And I think when I was trying to be a novelist or trying to be a serious writer, I was like I love how people put words together or stories together in a way that makes me feel like this.
yeah.
What I realized is my voice makes people feel good when I'm being funny. So I
Uh,
was like, oh well, I love being funny. What luck that I get to do that for money.
it does feel like within every comedian is like for some like a moody boy, moody teen, moody girl.
Well, we
Like
all
there is that side is so apparent. Like when you really get to know most people in comedy.
yeah, and I think it's because we like it's an escape. It's I this is so but you know when people laugh, a real laugh, it's something you can't control, right?
Yeah.
And when people cry watching a movie or a drama, it's also something you can't control. So I think it's born of the same thing,
Mm,
you know. And I think for like comedians, we feel things. It's just the medium that we use is one that makes people laugh rather than one that makes people cry. But the
Yeah.
feelings are the same. Like the root feeling is the same. And maybe that's why so many comedians like eventually later in life do drama or dramedy, because it's like
Yeah.
the feelings are there and they're never going to go away. It's just the way you express them, and that being able to do it in a successful way. The thing that comedy does for me and how it helps me deal with the feelings is that I feel good after I write a joke.
Hmm.
I made myself laugh.
Yeah.
And that is like great. Okay, at least I can laugh about this.
Yes,
And
yes, yes.
with immigration, that was the biggest thing. Like, it's crazy, it's long, it's frustrating. It gave me my first ever panic attack, the US immigration system, but I can laugh about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that feels like the nucleus of finding your voice too, where it's more about making yourself laugh or make yourself feel something
Yes.
than being paranoid about what happens when someone else reads it. It's like realizing that the internal thing is actually
Yeah,
the public
exactly.
thing. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I feel like, where is performance in the pecking order for you? We haven't talked much about that. Was it always like, I'm going to be a behind the scenes person for the most part?
Oh no, as I said before, I love attention. Uh,
Okay. Okay. Now I understand the scope of attention that you love.
no, I love getting on stage. I love doing, like, that's why I wanted to be in a band in high school. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I love music, but also I love being on stage, and we didn't have a great theater program at my school, so I was like, what if I'm in a band? So yeah, no, I love performing. I would say that because of my background and like I respect performers so much. I did do a lot of like performance in like comedy circles once I moved to the States, but I don't have the training that, say, a lot of people who are performers here in the United States have, with great theater programs in their high schools, college theater. I had to
Hmm.
start my own college theater group because I was like, I like theater, but no one else is doing it here.
I guess I'm seeing this through line of like a love of the official means of doing the thing. So many things are like a band,
Yeah.
theater, um, a book proposal. like you, it is still like the official, like the efficient official path. I think you have a love of that.
Oh,
It
that's
wasn't. It's not like I did a blog post about this and then
well. I also
it-
did the blog posts, but
okay.
yeah, I was like, no, I think the thing that I I am very restless, I think. So I was like, no, I'm going to be in a band and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do all this, because I think when I got to college, and this really helped me once I moved to the United States, because I was getting a visa, which is called the Alien of Extraordinary Ability visa, which requires you to have like a resume that you show the government that's like, look, I am extraordinary.
Hmm.
It was like, well, if I want to play in a band, then I have to start the band. If I want to do theater in college, I have to start my own theater group.
Yeah.
Um, all of these failed. I think that's the important thing to mention. But it did, like, I am very restless in the, like, I'm just gonna do the thing because I like it.
Huh.
So I am like a rule follower. I do like the officialness of stuff, but also I am very much I like to be making stuff, and I like to be making it with friends. I'm a big like collaborative. That's why I love improv so much and sketch more than like stand up, because you get to just play with your friends.
Is there anything that you're pouring your anxieties into creatively now? The book is out.
The book is out.
What's next outside of late night? Like what are you pouring it into? Like what's going on? What's the
Well,
magic? What's the next big thing?
I do a live version of. I still do the show based on the book, and
Hmm.
obviously it keeps improving. Like that first show that I did here in New York informed the book proposal, which then informed a later iteration of the show, which later informed the book, which now informs the version of the show that I perform. So I'm going to be doing that in a bunch of cities to promote the book.
Incredible, yeah.
Next up is Kansas City on March 20th. I don't know if this dates the episode. I will be doing that. So that's a big creative project. And then, I'm always like writing my screenplay and like working on a pilot,
Nice.
But yeah, always working on some like fun little story that is funny. That's always my priority. It was my priority with this book because I can try and guide people through the immigration system, but I'm not gonna tell them that this is a completely like legal, like factual legal document that's gonna help. Like I'm like, no, this is a joke book that has some pointers, but please call an immigration lawyer.
My favorite part of the book is where I forget all the technical phrasing, but it's like they want you to set up a meeting in their calendar. So you go onto their calendar and you find out that they schedule sexy time with their wife.
Yes.
It's just such a
that is based on a true story.
You made me very paranoid. Not saying that I have something like that in my calendar, but you made me very paranoid about like, what do I have public calendars?
Yeah, I used to work at a place, and one day I had to schedule a meeting with the boss of the place, and the boss of the place, his calendar was public because I had to add something to it, and he had scheduled a meeting called Sexy Times with his wife in the evening. And you know what? No kink shame. That's just something that I know about this person now.
Yes. That's how efficient that boss was. Actually, it's actually a sign of. Well, thank you for doing the show. I can't wait to see what version of Ugly Betty you make that gets spread across the world. And it's always good seeing you. Always good hanging out with you. And I forgot that I did that show once. I think I was a guest on that show.
Yes, you were a guest on this show.
Yeah.
On that show. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. It's always fun to see you and hang, and let's hang in real life.
Yes. I believe in you.
First I got your voicemail, then I got you. We can meet in person or maybe on Zoom. So tell me what's your genre, tell me what do you do. I'd like to know the things that specifically make